Previously on The Business.
Have a little look at what's going on with the world of social media. Our very good friend, very dear friend in studio this morning. Good morning, Mel Attree. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, welcome back.
Yes.
Busy time on the interwebs. Busy time. I've got something I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
But I'll save it.
Okay.
I'll save it like that cherry in that bowl of ice cream right till the end. So let's start with Oscar.
Who saves the cherry?
Who ate the cherry?
Oh,
Who
okay.
ate my cherry?
Oh, really?
Anyway,
Okay.
this is going somewhere nowhere.
No,
okay.
exactly. Let's talk about Oscar. Let's start there. Loads of tweets in.
Yeah.
Just open floor. What's going on?
So it's pretty massive. So, I mean, at the beginning of the trial, we were looking at about 8,000 mentions per hour. Yeah?
It was something like that.
It's dropped to about 3,000.
No surprises there.
5,000, it's kind of hovering around there. What's really interesting to see is that people are clearly following the trial very closely. So if you've got a witness that comes on that's quite interesting and adds a bit of drama, the figures spike almost immediately. The quality of conversation that's going on is not great, which is to be expected, I suppose.
Are people expressing their own views? Remember we had that discussion. You said people should be really careful going into this period about what they say. In that
people are
Twitter
not
sphere.
careful. People are expressing their views quite openly and honestly. I think what's been very interesting the past week is obviously that ruling initially with not being able to broadcast after we've decided to broadcast. And the problem with that is that the judge limited that just to Twitter. So because of her limited social media knowledge,
ignorance, that's all it was.
yeah,
wasn't
so
it?
she got a schooling overnight,
Yeah.
I think, from someone. But said, no, none of the Twitters. And then that meant, you could still, as she said, no blogs, no Twitter.
Yeah.
Which means you
Didn't
could
deal
potentially
with
still share
Facebook.
on Google Plus. You could share with Facebook. The other issue is that was limited to the media.
Yeah.
So any civilians, to use, in the courtroom, were WhatsApping their friends what was going on during that very hectic kind of forensic testimony. We're posting on Facebook, and that causes quite a couple of problems because you can't control everyone.
Isn't that a little scary that our judicial system is so far behind in terms of understanding the changed media landscape, citizen journalism, and all those kinds of things, which going forward
absolutely. Emma Sadler talks about it a lot, and there are only a couple of judges in the High Court that really do understand social media and get what digital is, and it is spreading. And I think by the end of this case, the judge will have a much better understanding of what kind of digital it is and what it covers and what it doesn't cover, and how to limit and how do you distinguish between who is media and who's not? Yeah.
I'm all for having an open courtroom when it comes to this for the public to be able to see, hear. I think it's a great education process besides anything else. But I'm also all for protecting the dignity of somebody who's deceased. Yeah. And I think that in that call which the judge made, regardless of whether she understood the terms of social media or not, I think her intentions were good.
The spirit of the ruling was the right spirit.
And I was with her 100%. I kind of went, you know what, here's a girl who has been murdered, whatever the situation is and however it's happened, whether it's culpable homicide or whether he intentionally murdered her, that is the trial. Yeah. But right now, her dignity needs to be protected. And when I heard that it happened, I was kind of thumbs up. Good for you.
Absolutely. I kind of felt that way as well because I think we've all become particularly desensitized to what the case is actually about. The other thing that's been very interesting to see, is I think that we are using social and broadcast properly in an integrated way for the first time in South Africa, which I think is great. Because it's clear as well, when the Eskom load shedding happened, people couldn't watch TV. So social media figures went through the roof during that day because they couldn't watch TV.
No other source.
So they were on their phones, kind of checking out Twitter and that sort of thing. So it's clear that people are consuming TV and social together. A lot, and that goes back to what we've always said about Twitter, investing in TV, investing in that kind of media. The two are so great, so beautifully matched. And that's been interesting to watch.
And a lot of people also starting to tweet for the first time, using this as their kind of entry into it.
Fascinating. I mean, I think I mentioned last week, Arthur Goldstack said that we probably get between 1 to 2 million new Twitter users during the trial.
That's a phenomenal figure.
And you can see as well when people are kind of asking questions, they want to know more about the legal system. And like you said, Ian, I think that's been one of the greatest things that come out of it. People have a better understanding around what the legal system is, how it works, who is that person, what do they do in the courtroom. And people joining Twitter just to ask a question, which has been really cool to see.
Africa is a very big focus at the moment when it comes to Twitter and tweets, and I see that there are certain hotspots in South Africa that have come up as being the most tweeted about, or most Twitter kind of focused. I'm sure your head's been buried in the sand with all this work that you've been doing.
Let's tell you.
Let's tell you and give you this information.
Educate me.
There's a report that's come out. Of course, these figures, it depends which report one looks to.
Sure.
But this specific report, Mel, has just come out releasing figures for the last 3 months of 2013. And it looked at the number of tweets that have been generated across Africa. The study's called How Africa Tweets. And according to that study, Johannesburg tops the list. It topped the list over those last 3 months with 344,000 odd geolocated tweets. Interestingly, it was followed by Kuruleni, and third on the list was Cairo with 227,000. But what I found even more interesting is that the next highest South African city for number of tweets was Durban and not Cape Town.
Mm-hmm. You see, that is interesting, number one. Number two, the problem is that these studies are often quite tricky to work with because not everyone geotags their tweets.
Exactly.
Yes.
Not everyone sets their location.
That's why we qualified with it depends where you look.
But I mean, I'm sure it's pretty representative of what's kind of happening.
When they say the Twitter activity in Africa peaked on the day that former President Nelson Mandela died, I mean, I'm sure they do have a lot of stats that they can back up what they're claiming. I guess it'll be quite interesting to see what these figures look like in comparison to the Oscar trial period figures.
Yeah. I mean, the volume is definitely, it's massive. It's increasing. But
What with the Oscar
yeah,
stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And anyone. I mean, I haven't seen any brands doing anything interesting over the last 8 days or so.
As you said last week, though, quite correctly, you got to be careful as a brand to jump on the bandwagon around the Oscar trial.
Or even just to cut through the clutter, you can't. I mean, I was looking for stuff to talk about this morning that wasn't kind of Oscar related, and I found a couple of bits and pieces, but it's flipping hard actually at the moment because between Oscar, rain in Joburg, which is just so depressing, and potholes, there's not much else kind of going on in terms of conversation online.
So Mel, another interesting thing that's come out of this particular study, and I'd like to pick your brain about it, is that they're saying that soccer was the most discussed topic on Twitter in Africa over those last 3 months, and that the most mentioned soccer team was in fact Johannesburg's Orlando Pirates. Isn't that interesting?
Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Orlando Pirates has Orlando and Kaizer Chiefs had an amazing social presence. Social and sport is phenomenal. It works so well together. And if you look at other platforms like Mixit, and most of the guys that do big sponsorship work, so Absa, Vodacom, those kind of brands, they're getting massive talk about soccer on those platforms. People love soccer in this continent. It's amazing, and they want to talk about it. That's actually pretty cool. And because I like the way that they've structured their social media presence. They do a really good job,
Yes.
a lot of the soccer clubs. That's not really surprising at all.
I'm surprised because one would assume that the lower LSM population in South Africa don't have access to smartphones and don't have access readily available access to Twitter. Yet Orlando Pirates are right up there.
That's exactly the point, is that a lot of the clients, if they're presented with a proposal that includes Twitter in their digital marketing strategy, very often make that assumption. I think these are the kinds of reports that help to debunk those myths.
It's absolutely a very, very incorrect assumption. There are plenty of lower LSMs using Facebook and using Twitter and using WeChat and using Mixit.
It's the device that is different, isn't it?
And most of these, a lot of these kind of platforms are accessible, via dumb phones, as they would call it. And you can access now, so through WeChat, if you were following, for example, a particular brand user, you could access their Twitter through WeChat. I'm seeing a lot of those requests coming through, which is quite interesting. But when we were working on a political party, and we're trying to recruit people to volunteer for the party, the conversation that was going on Facebook was massive.
Yeah.
And it was all lower LSM conversation.
Are there studies available where people can pull papers and figures and
Yes,
facts?
absolutely. It's always a minefield for people like Mel
it
and I,
is.
but you have to be really careful. You have to understand how to analyze those figures, and you have to quantify and qualify because a lot of people are using the figures, I think, in a very irresponsible manner. I
Yeah.
don't know but I really do believe that. So I think you've got to do a lot of homework, and you have to compare many, many reports and surveys in order to be able to say to a potential advertiser or marketer or client, this is my recommendation and this is why.
I just the landscape will change now when it comes to advertising to lower LSM folk in our country and steering away from Twitter and Facebook. I think that's got to change. It's got to change.
Absolutely.
You know, traditionally, if you think back to advertising trends in this country years ago, when one was targeting the so-called emerging market, as the brands like to call that market, radio was the first thing that came to mind, alongside out of home. And unfortunately, a lot of those advertisers still think that way.
Yeah, but I mean, definitely the lower LSMs are active, and I think it's still, we have to go back to brands kind of trying to find the right people on the platforms and asking people what they want. Anyway.
Right.
Do you want to talk about a couple of fun things quickly?
Well, I do, yeah. I do. Have you got some fun things to talk about?
So listen, there was a very interesting thing that happened this week. So did you guys see the kissing video?
I loved it.
Okay, I loved it, right?
I absolutely loved it.
It's a fantastic video. Everyone likes kissing. It's awesome. Everyone's beautiful. It's very interesting. It's well done. And it turns out now it was actually brought to us by a fashion brand. It's a fashion ad.
It doesn't surprise me.
So now we've got people that are freaking out. Oh, how dare you! I
they
can't
feel
believe
cheated.
that you cheated me into watching this video, which I loved, which I now hate because it's paid for. So I wanted to talk quickly about the concept of branded content.
Yes.
And is it necessary that we have to be transparent about branded content?
No.
Or can we just do cool guerrilla stuff, which I think that is?
I thought it was marvelous.
Yes. I mean, I thought it was a wonderful kind of thing. It wasn't overly punted as a brand afterwards. And I think they're smart in actually saying, let's release a little snippet of content and then associate ourselves with the content afterwards. Yeah. I think kudos to you guys for experimenting and seeing what you can do.
Who was the brand, do you know?
It's a small fashion brand. A very small fashion brand. I can't remember the name now.
Oh, dear.
Hang on. It is a brand called...
Okay, well, I want to put you on the spot.
Wren. An LA-based label called Wren.
W-R-E-N?
Yeah, as in the bird.
Okay.
Yeah, I loved it. I think it's great. It's gone viral. Good for them. Awesome. Great idea.
I have a question. When it comes to that sort of thing, I saw a lot of reports that came out after the Oscar selfie with all the celebrities from Ellen DeGeneres saying that it was sponsored by Samsung.
Samsung, yes.
So was that a premeditated kind of sponsorship? Was it just a sponsorship on Twitter?
Yeah.
What was
so you'll probably find that, and then you'll probably find that Samsung said to Ellen on the night, we're going to give you a Samsung Galaxy. Do whatever you want with it. Like, take cool pictures, do whatever. It's product placement. And it's PR. So, and I mean, the PR, the exposure they got out of that single shot alone is absolutely phenomenal. And then Samsung apparently behind the scenes started to have a little bit of a fit because Ellen was tweeting from her iPhone behind the scenes. But she uses an iPhone, you know, you can't change people's habits and you can't have it all. So when you're doing product placement like that, you have to be very cognizant of the fact that nobody who's using an iPhone is actually going to switch to a Samsung completely in one night. I just think it's impossible. So you have to take what you can get and give some free rein in terms of how you do that. It goes back to what we were talking about with that car brand, giving up their Instagram to popular Instagram users to create videos for them. It was Ford. Yeah. You've got to let go a degree of control in order to get maximum believable and organic kind of feedback and publicity, which is what they got. It was phenomenal. Now everyone wants to recreate the Ellen selfie.
And
I've never seen anything like that.
I'm sure
before,
they will.
You know? So yes.
Mel.
Yes.
I know it's not your field of specialty, but I am going to bring it up because
the cherry.
Yeah, I think this is potentially something that could change our TV industry forever. DSTV, MultiChoice, have just put up their rates, and quite sort of nonchalantly, they've put them up.
They do it every year.
Well, it's now tipping on 700 rand. For 700 rand a month.
It's actually higher if you have a PVR.
Okay.
It's an additional 50 rand. So it was 695. It's gone up over the 700 rand mark on premium plus the 50 rand.
So let's call it 750 just for argument's sake. For 750 rand, I can rent a 4 megabyte ADSL line. And now using an Apple TV or a thing called Roku, I can stream in Netflix.
Absolutely.
And all sorts of other...
It's illegal to stream in Netflix.
Is it?
Yes, it is. In fact, it was made public about 2 or 3 days ago that if your territory is blocked, you are breaking the law.
Okay.
Because effectively you're fudging your ISP. Yeah,
And
you're
you-
pretending you live in the States.
Correct. That's the point, and you're infringing the content right.
Right. So it's
The
content.
content rights
Yes.
don't cover this territory, and that is why you are blocked.
So let's assume
But
that
that's not going to stop people doing it. So carry on.
No. But let's assume that you don't stream anything illegal. How big a deal is this going forward for content providers like MultiChoice? I'm dying to know.
It is a big deal. Of course, it's a big deal. That's why you've seen providers like MultiChoice launch DSTV Online, DSTV Catch Up, DSTV Box Office. They've known this was coming for a very long time. They could have launched Catch Up and Box Office 6-7 years ago, but they held back because it wasn't in their interests to, and there's not much competition. But now, with the internet penetrating even further, more people having access to devices that can access the kinds of content you're talking about, they've had to start opening up the floodgates a little to also make that available. And in fact, you're probably going to see, I think, Mel, I don't know what you think, but you'll see that this description we have of MultiChoice as a pay TV player is no longer going to be an accurate description for that company going forward.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think most of the larger broadcasters, you can include the SABC in that as well. I think they are focusing more in terms of radio stations, for example, are no longer radio stations; they're entertainment kind of hubs, entertainment destinations, and that's what DSTV is. That's what radio will be. That's what TV stations will be going forward. It also means that we need to start then considering branded content for advertisers, and how do we deliver that, and what platforms do we use?
Yeah.
So we talk again about going back to Moby soaps and those kind of things that were pretty big, or starting to be big 6 or 7 years ago. Content on demand through websites, facilitated episodes, viewing by appointment, that kind of thing. I think it's going to be more important going forward, because obviously now as well, you don't need a massive production house to develop an episode of something, or kind of content for you.
Definitely
So it changes
not.
the game completely.
Audiences are far more forgiving.
that
There's no
interesting?
need for that big screen and surround sound. And
I see a wave, and I might be wrong, but I see a new wave kind of beginning here of alternative TV viewing.
Absolutely,
It's
and
already
I think
begun
it already
on the
has,
internet
you know?
with YouTube, but,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about lying on your couch with a remote control in your
Yes.
hand, being able to flick channels. I think that wave is about to start, and I think content providers and advertisers and people who are wanting to climb onto this bandwagon need to sit up now and go, there's something happening here. Maybe we need to pay attention.
No, people's habits in terms of how they consume media are changing completely,
Sure.
which
And
is
that-
fascinating.
And that's what the smart TV is actually about. That's what it's for, is players like Samsung seeing that, players like LG seeing that,
Very
and
interesting.
saying, well,
Mm.
consume your internet content on this big, what we traditionally call
TV.
TV,
screen.
which we don't, because most people's TVs, in inverted commas now, are laptops. Your laptop is your multimedia kind of center.
Yeah.
You get away without a terrestrial kind of plug-in
Yep.
aerial-based
right.
TV.
Yep.
Yeah.
Remember the days of bunny ears trying to get the signal?
Yeah, hanging out the window.
Now I'll show my age.
Yes.
Yeah.
One last thing.
Yes.
Did you guys see the amazing David Cameron meme on Instagram?
No.
Which is just
No.
beautiful. I must send you the link with the picture. Sorry, I just thought about it now.
Please do.
David Cameron using Instagram and holding up his telephone and saying, just on an important phone call to Obama. And within minutes, people had started ripping off this photo. Patrick Stewart ripped it off, holding a bottle of wet wipes next to his ear, saying, "I'm patching in." Somebody else saying, "Wait for me, I'm on the call." It's just an example of how I think a lot of politicians are really getting social media wrong.
Did you see Obama with Zach Galifianakis?
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I'm dying to. I
So-
mean, the fact that he got him onto that show is just phenomenal.
In the White House.
Yeah.
In the White House as well.
Absolutely love it.
I mean, that was just an absolute scoop for him.
But
And
Obama is one of those politicians, though, who gets it, got it,
Yeah.
and got to the White House because of it.
he totally did. And he had a good few jibes at Zach Galifianakis as
Oh,
well.
good.
So it was really, really brilliant.
Awesome. Cool.
Mel, thank you. What an interesting chat.
Thank you. Yes. I'll be
I-
back next week.
I hope that you don't work too hard. Save yourself from this mad thing that's happening
it's
at the
all
moment.
good. It's all good.
Thank you so much. We'll
Cool.
speak to you again next week.
Thank you.
Oh.
Business on Balls. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 12 p.m.
onballs.co.za.
Brought to you by FNB Business Banking.